What if the only person who ever tried to save you was a stranger in the middle of a deadly storm? The wind hammered the Ellsworth farmhouse like the fists of an angry spirit. Snow rushed across the Montana plains, swallowing fences and blurring the outline of the barn. Inside the small kitchen, one lantern hissed against the draft. Its weak light shook over the supper table where the Ellsworth family sat in a silence so tight it felt ready to snap. Rose Ellsworth sat at the far end, hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. At 27, she was soft-bodied and heavy-set, her cheeks flushed with cold and embarrassment. The day had been hard, the kind that froze water buckets and cracked barn doors, but the look on her brother Caleb's face made everything inside her turn colder than the snow outside. Caleb leaned forward, tall and thin, his fists planted on the table. His eyes were sharp, full of the bitterness of a man crushed by debt, winter, and pride. He glared at her like she had done something unforgivable. "You eat more than you work," he snapped, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. He shoved his plate away. "While I'm breaking my back keeping this place alive, you sit here stuffing yourself like a cow in clover." The words struck hard. Rose felt her breath catch. She lowered her eyes so they couldn't see the tears burning behind them. She had heard insults like this since she was a girl. Too big, too slow, too much. But tonight the words hurt deeper, fueled by Caleb's anger and the pressure of a failing farm. Her sister-in-law shifted uncomfortably, staring at her plate, too scared to speak against Caleb. The rafters groaned with wind, filling the silence that followed. Caleb wasn't finished. "Maybe if you'd taken a husband like a normal woman your age," he said, voice rising, "you wouldn't be rotting here. But no man wants a wife who can't cross the yard without gasping for breath." Rose's chest stung. Shame and fury rose together, a storm inside her chest. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping across the floor. "You think I chose this?" Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "You think I haven't prayed every night to be different?" Caleb laughed, a hollow, cruel sound. "Different? You're dead weight, Rose. Nothing but a shame on this family." The storm outside roared louder, echoing his anger. Rose's vision blurred with tears she could no longer hold back. She turned quickly so they wouldn't see. She grabbed her shawl from the wall peg and fled out the back door into the howling night. The cold slammed into her like a wall. Snow whipped against her face. Her skirts dragged through deep drifts as she stumbled away from the house, heart pounding, breath sharp in the freezing air. Behind her, Caleb shouted something, but the wind swallowed his voice. Soon the farmhouse disappeared, swallowed whole by the blizzard. The world became nothing but white and shadow. Rose fought her way through the storm, boots sinking deep, her body heavy and slow. Every insult she had ever heard seemed to ride on the wind. Too fat, too useless, too much. She could almost hear Caleb's voice chasing her. "You'll never be wanted." Her throat tightened. Her breath came fast and painful. The cold bit at her skin until she couldn't feel her fingers. Her foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow. She fell hard to her knees. The impact sent shockwaves through her bones. Snow collected on her shoulders as she stayed there, hunched over, shaking. "Please," she whispered into the wind, "just let me die in peace. I'm so tired." She closed her eyes. Let the storm take her. Let the world finally be rid of her. For one quiet moment, she felt surrender pull her down like deep water. But then, through the scream of the wind, came a sound that didn't belong to the storm. A man's voice. Low. Strong. Cutting through the snow like an axe. "Girl, hold on. I'm here." Rose lifted her head weakly. A shape moved through the blizzard. Tall, broad. Wrapped in heavy furs that snapped in the wind. Every step he took was steady, powerful, as if the storm itself feared him. "No," she croaked, shaking her head. "Don't. I'm too heavy. Leave me." The man knelt in front of her. Snow clung to his hair and beard, turning him into something out of a legend. His eyes, sharp blue, held hers with a heat that shocked her. He slid his arms beneath her with ease. "I'd rather die than leave you," he said. Rose gasped as he lifted her off the ground like she weighed nothing at all. Her head fell against his chest. She could hear the strong thud of his heart, steady even as the storm battered them. "Why?" she whispered, barely conscious. "Because your life matters," he said, voice rough but sure. "And I won't let the storm decide otherwise." He carried her deeper into the white chaos, each step carving through wind and snow. Behind them, the Ellsworth farm disappeared. Ahead lay only darkness and unknown land. But in the stranger's arms, for the first time in years, Rose felt something she had never expected. Someone had chosen to hold on to her. And the storm, no matter how fierce, could not take that away. What if the first safe place you ever knew was a cabin belonging to a stranger who refused to let you die? The storm pushed against Silas Reeves with all its strength, but the mountain man did not slow. Snow lashed at his face, the wind trying to tear the woman from his arms, but he held her tightly. His muscles burned with each step, yet his grip never loosened. Rose's head rested weakly against his chest, her breath shallow, sometimes disappearing so long he feared it would not return. "Stay with me," he muttered, his voice rough. "You hear me? Stay with me." He knew these woods better than most men knew the lines on their own hands. A fallen pine marked the halfway point. Beyond it lay a bend and a frozen creek. Past that creek his cabin waited, crouched against the mountain slope, hidden from the worst of the wind. But tonight the path was nearly erased. Snow swallowed everything, covering roots, stones, and even the trail. Twice he stumbled, dropping to one knee with Rose clutched tight, but he pushed back up with a growl. He refused to let the storm bury her. Finally, after what felt like hours of fighting the wind, the dark outline of the cabin appeared. Relief hit his chest so hard he nearly faltered. With one last burst of strength, he reached the door, kicked it open, and stepped inside. Warmth did not greet them. The fire had gone out in his absence, leaving the cabin cold and still. But Silas moved quickly. He laid Rose gently on the furs beside the hearth, then struck flint to steel until sparks caught tinder. Soon flames grew, climbing higher, casting orange light on her pale face. He knelt beside her, pulling off her wet boots, rubbing her hands between his own calloused palms to bring warmth back to them. Her skin was frighteningly cold. "Come on," he whispered. "Don't quit now." He melted snow in a tin cup and held it near the fire. When it was warm enough, he lifted her head and tried to offer her a sip. Her lips barely parted, but she swallowed, just enough. Her eyes fluttered open. Confusion and fright filled them, but also something softer, something like surprise. "Why?" she whispered. Silas sat back on his heels, his face lit by firelight. "Because your life is worth saving," he said simply. "Don't let anyone tell you different." A tear slipped from the corner of her eye, not from fear, from a deeper wound he could not yet name. Hours passed with Silas tending her, feeding the fire, warming her hands, checking her breathing. Outside the storm roared on, but inside the cabin, life held on, because Silas Reeves refused to let go. When she finally drifted into a deeper sleep, he sat beside her, his back against the log wall. His thoughts drifted to a life he had buried long ago. Denver. His medical work. A wife with a soft laugh. A baby girl whose fingers curled around his thumb. A carriage accident that shattered all of it in a single moment. He rubbed his hand across his face. Grief had driven him into the mountains. Pain had built these walls. Silence had become his company. But saving this woman, something stirred again, something he had tried to kill inside himself. He looked at her sleeping form. Her breath, slow but steady. Her face soft and peaceful now that she was warm. He wasn't going to lose her, not after carrying her through a storm that would have buried most men. When dawn came, pale and thin, the storm still had not fully passed. Snow piled high around the cabin walls. Trees bent low beneath the weight. Inside, however, warmth filled the small space. The fire burned strong. The air smelled of smoke and pine. Rose stirred. Her lashes flickered. Slowly she opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Silas sitting in the chair beside her, his arms crossed, his beard tangled, his eyes half closed from exhaustion. He looked rough and tired but steady like the mountain itself. When he noticed she was awake, he leaned forward. "How do you feel?" She swallowed. Her voice came out weak, tired. He helped her sit up a little. "You'll feel better with food, broth first." He lifted a small tin cup to her lips. She drank slowly, grateful for the warmth. She looked around, taking in the cabin. Stone walls, wooden beams, a heavy table, a small bed against one wall, animal furs, dried herbs hanging above the hearth. "This is your home?" she whispered. "It is." Quote, "You live here alone?" "I do." She watched him carefully. Something about him felt powerful but safe, a man carved by loss but still standing. Her voice cracked. "I thought I was going to die." Silas shook his head. "Not on my watch." She blinked, confused by the surety in his tone. No one had ever spoken for her with such certainty. No one had fought for her, or carried her, or pulled her out of a storm at the risk of their own life. "You shouldn't have saved me," she said suddenly. "You shouldn't have wasted your strength on someone like me." His jaw tightened. "Don't speak like that." "It's true," she whispered. "Caleb says I'm nothing, that I'm a burden, that I—" Silas cut her off, his voice sharp. "Your brother is a fool." Her eyes widened. No one had ever contradicted Caleb. Not once. Not ever. Silas leaned closer, his blue eyes fierce. "I didn't carry a burden out of that storm," he said. "I carried a woman whose life mattered. A woman who deserved better than the lies she's been fed." Rose's lips trembled. Her eyes filled. She turned her face away, too embarrassed to be seen with tears. Silas reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "You survived that storm because you're stronger than you think." Rose let out a shaky breath. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel weak. She felt seen. Days passed, with slow healing. The storm finally eased, leaving the world covered in deep snow. Inside the cabin, Rose gained strength, little by little. Silas made her teas, warm meals, and kept the fire burning through the night. She helped when she could, folding blankets, mending a shirt, sweeping the floor. Once, when she laughed softly at something he said, Silas felt something inside him crack open, like the first hint of spring beneath winter weight. But their peace would not last. One evening Silas returned from checking traps, snow dusting his shoulders. His face was tense. "3 men in Copperfield were asking about me," he said. "And about you." Rose's stomach dropped. "Who?" He hesitated, then answered, "Your brother among them." Her breath hitched. Fear pushed cold into her blood. "He won't stop," she whispered. "He never stops." Silas set his jaw. "Let him come," he said. "We'll face him together." In that moment, Rose knew the storm outside had only been the beginning. A far worse storm was coming for them both. What if the person you once feared losing became the only person worth fighting for? The sun barely touched the ridge that morning when Rose heard the sound that froze her blood. Hoofbeats, slow, heavy, coming up the mountain path with purpose. She stood at the cabin door, her hands trembling, her breath catching as the dread she had carried all her life took shape between the pines. Silas stepped beside her, his presence solid as stone. He didn't look surprised. He had been waiting for this moment. He had sharpened his knives, checked his rifle, stacked wood by the door to barricade it if needed. Now he stared toward the trees with calm resolve. "They're here," she whispered, her voice tight. "I know," Silas said quietly. "Stay behind me." But Rose shook her head. "Not this time." The riders emerged through the snow-dusted pines. Caleb was in front, sharp-faced and furious, followed by 4 men from Copperfield. Men Rose recognized from the saloon. Men eager for trouble if someone else would take the blame. They halted just steps from the cabin. Caleb slid off his horse, boots crunching in the snow. His eyes were cold and triumphant, as if he had already won. "Rose," he called, his voice dripping with poison. You're coming home, now." Rose's hands shook, but she stepped forward anyway. "No." "I'm not." Caleb barked an angry laugh. "The mountain man has poisoned your head. You think he wants you? He wants this land, the silver underneath it. You're too blind to see it." Silas stepped beside Rose, towering and broad, his voice steady and deep. "I want her," he said. "Not the land, not the silver. Her." Caleb's jaw twitched. His men shifted uneasily, glancing at Silas's size, the calm fury in his eyes. "You kidnapped her," Caleb spat. "You kept her prisoner. The sheriff will hear of this. I'll see you hang." Rose felt heat rush to her chest, a familiar fear ready to crush her again. But she didn't give in. Not this time. She stepped forward, her voice sharp as flint. "I walked into this home by choice. You left me to die, Caleb. You threw your cruelty at me my whole life. But he," she pointed at Silas, "saved me, and you will not take me from here." Her words hit Caleb like a slap. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "You ungrateful thing," he snapped. "I fed you. I cared for you." "No," she interrupted, her voice rising. "Mama fed me. You only fed your anger. You treated me like a burden, a joke, a weight you hated carrying. But look around, Caleb. I'm still standing. I chose this life. I chose this man, and I'm not going anywhere." Silas felt her shaking beside him and gently placed his hand on her back, steadying her. Caleb's face twisted with rage. He pulled his gun. Everything exploded at once. Silas threw his arm around Rose, pulling her out of the way. Caleb's men jumped off their horses, two reaching for rifles. Silas shoved Rose behind him and lunged forward. His fist met the nearest man's jaw with a crack that echoed through the trees. Snow sprayed up as the man hit the ground. Another raised his rifle, but Rose grabbed the fire poker from beside the cabin door and struck it aside with more strength than she thought she had. The weapon clattered to the snow. The man swore and stumbled back. "You little—" He never finished. Silas's arm swung like a hammer, knocking him into the snowbank. Caleb fired a shot, the bullet grazing Silas's shoulder. Rose screamed his name. Silas didn't fall, didn't even flinch. He turned toward Caleb, eyes burning. "You hurt her all her life," Silas growled, stepping forward, blood staining his shirt. "It ends today." Caleb backed up, panic flickering in his eyes. "Stay back!" But Silas kept walking, each step calm, controlled, unstoppable. Caleb aimed again, but Rose rushed forward and shoved his arm upward. The gunshot flew into the sky. Caleb stumbled, the force knocking him off balance. Silas grabbed Caleb by the front of his coat, hauling him off his feet like he weighed nothing. "You left your sister to die in a storm," Silas said, his voice steady but filled with fury. "You call that family? You call that care?" Quote. Caleb struggled, kicking, fists flailing. Silas didn't let him go. "You don't get to hurt her again," Silas said. "Not with words, not with hands, not with threats." He dropped Caleb into the snow. Caleb scrabbled backward, scrambling away from him like a frightened animal. Silas pointed to the horses. "Take your men," he said, "and leave this mountain." Caleb looked at Rose, pure hatred in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "No, Caleb, I won't." Caleb climbed onto his horse with shaky hands. His men followed him, bruised and shaken. One of them refused to meet Rose's gaze. Another muttered, "Should have left this alone, Caleb." They rode away, down the ridge, into the trees, gone. Silas turned back toward Rose just as her knees gave out. He caught her before she hit the ground. "Are you hurt?" he asked, brushing her hair back gently. She shook her head, tears streaming. "You were shot." "It's nothing," he said. "You matter more." He lifted her into his arms, not because she couldn't walk, but because he needed to hold her, needed to make sure she was real and safe. Inside the cabin, he sat with her on the bed while she wrapped cloth around his shoulder. Her hands trembled, but she worked with care. "You could have died," she whispered. He touched her cheek. His calloused thumb brushed away a tear. "I'd rather die," he said softly, "than let the world take you from me." Her breath caught. No man had ever chosen her. No man had ever defended her. No man had ever said her life had value. Until now. She leaned into him, her forehead pressing against his chest. His arms came around her, strong and steady. "You're not alone anymore," Silas whispered. "This is your home. As long as you want it." Rose lifted her face, tears shining in her eyes. "Then I want it," she said. "I want you. I want this life. I choose it." Silas closed his eyes, relief and love flooding his face. Snow began falling softly outside, covering the old tracks, washing away the chaos of the morning. Inside the cabin, a new kind of quiet settled. Not fear, not sorrow. Peace, the kind that grows only after a storm finally breaks. Rose rested her head on Silas's chest, feeling the steady rise and fall. She felt safe, wanted, chosen. For the first time in her life, she believed she was worthy of love. And she knew without question that she would never face another storm alone.